I'd like to call the meeting to order for February 24th, 2025. First on the agenda is reserve fund request. If you look in front of you, most of you will have this. This is a reserve fund request for insurance payment that needs to be made. Andrea, could you speak to this, please?
Medical bills. The town of Northfield adopted 111F and 111M a number of years ago, prior to my time. And so firefighters, paramedics, and police do not do workers' comp, or maybe police do not do workers' comp. They are actually covered through a different program called 111M or 111F. It's a different insurance program. We do have some insurance, but the insurance is to wages for those. So we pay a separate insurance payment to cover some of the wages, not necessarily all, depending on the person's salary. And so that we did cover and have absorbed those wages within the budget for this particular individual. But there are two medical bills, and because under 111M and F, medical bills aren't covered like they are with workers' comp, the town has to pay those medical bills. It's not huge. It's two medical bills from when they first sought service. And so that's what we're asking. Again, we absorbed more than this cost in wages into the EMS budget, but we're trying not to overtake that budget too much. So it made sense to go with something tangible and easily definable, these two bills being those.
Any questions?
Just a quick question. So this is not covered by the town's insurance policy? This is the town is completely responsible for this, is that correct?
The town's insurance policy, we have workers' comp, but this individual is covered by 111M. That is not a workers' comp protocol.
So this is not a deductible. This is a full cost of the billing. Okay.
Correct. So, the emergency room and then a specialist.
Any other questions?
I just had a curiosity question. So say, for instance, God forbid, one of our officers or paramedics or whatever gets seriously injured, and all of a sudden we've got like 40, 50,000 in medical bills. You're saying that's going to have to come out of pocket with us?
Yes, the town accepted 111F and 111M.
Oh.
The other problem is, from my past history of knowledge, that many medical providers will not accept any more workman's comp for municipalities.
So, yeah, these aren't workers' comp claims. And usually if you go to the...
If they're under workman's comp.
Right. If you went to an emergency
it's
room...
extremely difficult to get any type of medical care
Right.
for that individual.
If you went to the hospital, then it would have, for emergency response when you were first injured, then it would be a workers' comp. It would be a different situation. But these are not workers' comp claims.
Any other questions? If not, I'll look for a motion.
I, Bernie Parada, make a motion to transfer in the amount of $1,462.30 to account number 62-231-5740 EMS insurance to pay two medical bills that are the responsibility of the town.
Is there a second?
I, Gail Weiss, second the motion.
All those in favor signify by saying yes or no. Dan Campbell says yes.
Gail Weiss, yes.
Bernie Parada, yes.
Lindsay McCarthy, yes.
Robin Internet, yes.
Unanimous. Moving on to the budget. Tonight we're going to go over the budget that we have been presented to us. And the first thing we're going to start off is looking at not the omnibus, but we're going to look at the overall budget. Is there anything in the overall budget that we need to revisit? This is not the capital, this would be the overall budget.
And just so you know, you did receive the animal control budget, so that is in there. I did receive a request today, so for from the highway superintendent, as he's had in the past, he's looking to promote one of his employees to a foreman position. He's not filled that position for some time. He's had a rather, I say young crew, I just meant that I hadn't been there a lot, and now he feels he has a member of his crew that he would like to put in the foreman position. So I did, this afternoon, have to modify the request for the highway department wages. Should the select board, which is meeting Tuesday next week, move forward with the foreman position, that would change fiscal '26's request for those wages. So between the regular wages, which is and I'll send this out again to you guys after tonight if you make any changes, and the winter wages, it's an increase of about $8,500 to the highway department regular wages and winter wages. One's 47, one's 38. And so that is reflected, however, in the sheets that he handed you today. So all the sheets you see today have, for example, the budget summary, the line item budget, and the omnibus budget all reflect that increase. So you can see it.
Now, this is like a promotion within the department, is what I
Correct.
understand.
And it's a person who has a certain, skill set, a certain level of responsibility, and is left in charge when, for example, the highway superintendent is unavailable or away or whatever.
So there's no additional health insurance?
No, it's a current employee, we're not,
Yeah.
we're just, this one employee would be changing
The only difference is the increase in salary
wages.
Yeah.
for the position.
Yeah, it has a different wage classification.
Any questions on the addition to the budget? Okay, now, one of the things I mentioned is, do we need to go line by line through the omnibus? And if we do, we can specify which areas we want to discuss. Most of them are pretty cut and dry. The only one that we didn't have was the new position for the DPW. Take a minute and look this over. I know you've had a chance to look at it at home.
So the omnibus is what goes in the town meeting report, and it is a summary of much of the line item. It's not every summary, but it is a summary that is traditionally what the town has presented as part of the budget that goes on the warrant. So it puts some of these departments together.
So how many additional people are being requested that would be benefited? Because like what you're having, a
Correct.
custodial person and weren't.
And the highway's
So
asking for a
there's-
person.
Okay,
So
and
two.
that's all been accounted for in the
Yes.
insurance and retirement?
Yes.
Are there any questions on those two positions?
No.
Seeing none?
You'll also notice, I think, let me just see if it's in this one. The select board asked me, if you look down, 6 down on the omnibus,
What
the
number?
select board chair and the select board sort of discussed, department number 122 on the omnibus.
Okay, yeah.
It
Okay.
says select board, there's salary, board's clerk, and then select board community planning coordinator. The select board chair is recommending that position go in. As you'll see, no appropriation is requested because there are still significant grant funds able to fund that position for this year and into next year. I mean, next year and into the following year even. But it would be an establishment of that position in the budget, so I wanted to point it out, although there's no funds requested for '26, and probably only a portion of funds will be requested for '27. But it is a new line item. So I want you to miss
Is
it.
that person replacing the grant writer?
Correct.
Okay, so it's just becoming a larger.
Right, I think
position.
that it's becoming different. The select board is reviewing a job description right now to talk about some directional change in that position. The biggest change will be support for planning, not just the planning board, but actual community development and planning. So there's an entire host of, the town's zoning bylaws have not been revisited in 10 years. except for a few piecemeal things. And based on various studies that we've had done, based on mass general law changes to accessory dwelling units, to solar laws, all of those need to be reviewed. It's a very large task. This person wouldn't necessarily be a certified person, but they would be able to coordinate that. I am looking to put in some grant money to try and get a professional that would work with this person and the planning board. The planning board just, it's a board that meets monthly, and they have had a lot on their plate, and they continue to. They just don't have the time. It's overwhelming for them to do a revisit of the zoning bylaws. And there's some that, for example, the accessory dwelling unit went into effect in February. So we are technically out of compliance. It's understood, we don't have a lot of issues. At the end of this year, there'll be a new law for solar that was passed at the state level about solar development. We have to come into compliance with that bylaw. So there's a whole bunch of bylaws, and we don't even have some bylaws. We don't have a solar battery storage bylaw. It doesn't exist. One of the consultants, when we were doing development, pointed out we don't have a lighting bylaw about light in town. A lot of towns do that for certain reasons. They think our signage bylaw is out of date. Our accessory dwelling unit is now, obviously not complicit with stuff. So the idea was to maybe change this position to start to incorporate some of that and work on grants and projects that have more to do with development and planning. Not a town planner, because I think that we don't really rise to the level of that. The job description is broader than that. But would definitely, I think the planning board would would love some assistance in organizing all those public meetings, placing ads. To change a zoning bylaw is a very complicated and lengthy process. It requires a lot of public notice and advertising, a lot of legal language, coordinating with the lawyers, and the planning board just doesn't have that. So that would be one aspect of the job that's been added. And then other grants and projects that are still related to community and economic development and public outreach would still stay with that job.
And looking over the omnibus and the budgets as far as doing it, realistically, the increases in the budget are energy and people's salaries and that sort of thing, and things that were needed. And I don't see that there's anything in the budgets that we can look at that we could cut. If anybody has any suggestions on that, if you wanted to look at any specific budget, we could look at that and discuss that. If I see none, we're going to move on to capital.
My only question was the highway position. Is that a need or is that a want? I missed the meeting, I watched all the thing, but I didn't really get a strong feel on whether that was something they truly need or something they just really would like to have. No.
It's a position that had been there before, and he wants to reestablish that position.
Well, it's not formally been a position. What he used to do was he used to hire some labor through Chapter 90 funding for specific projects. I don't know that a position was cut. He seems to think so. I don't see it in the budget, but there was money used at times for labor through Chapter 90. And there was a lot of things about how the budget was done. They didn't break out the winter roads budget, so we did a lot of work in changing how highway was funded and how it broke out. You needed to break out winter roads because that's an over expenditure category, but if you lumped it all in together, you couldn't. It was complicated. We've shifted in direction to using that Chapter 90 money because there's so many more grants out there for doing things. The problem is they don't always fund engineering and much of the support needed to go after the grant. So we've moved away from funding labor on specific projects to try and move towards grant funding, which often needs a consultant or an engineer up front, and using those funds to try and leverage them against the construction funding and the expertise to apply for those grants, which has to some extent shifted his ability to use it for discrete and separate projects for labor.
Okay.
So I don't know that we cut a position so much as we have changed some of the way that he has funded some of his project work.
Okay.
If that makes sense?
Yeah.
And he used to supplement his people there with using the person,
Maintenance person.
yes, or, yeah, so.
Right.
Now that we've created that position for the town's buildings, it's, he's lost that
That half
person.
position,
So-
that, but in truth has sort of migrated to being a full-time highway worker. So if he was using that position, but he's absorbed that position. We aren't cutting it. So,
More questions?
Yeah, I have one question concerning, so that the public is aware of. What was the final increase in the health insurance to the cost? Because at the time when you had met with us, you were waiting for the meeting where the
percentage?
the percentage was not available at the time you met, and I think the public should be aware of what the effect was.
It's up there.
it's,
Yeah,
it's,
I think
every
they should
town
know.
is just,
Yeah, they all got whammy.
oh, it's huge.
Yeah.
Every
Yeah.
town
It
is.
doesn't matter if you're, because like I know Amherst Pelham got hit and they're.
Oh, everybody
they're with
did.
Maya. I know a lot of us are with Hampshire County
Maya's
Trust.
increases across the board, depending on your community, were 9 to 19%.
Yeah.
But it depended on your community.
Mm-hmm.
There were a few communities that got 9, way more at the other end of the spectrum.
Yeah, I think it was like, I want to say 16, 17 with the trust.
Yeah, someplace.
Yeah,
with
it went up.
18 in certain
Yeah.
cases.
Yes, that's what we
But
had.
I just want to know so the public is aware of what the cost.
Actual cost.
The actual
Yeah.
cost was to
Right,
the
and
town.
MedX
Yeah.
rates went up 15.3, that was MedX.
Yeah.
And, excuse me, and the regular rate, I thought I had printed that one out in here. Don't have the
I know, it just
spreadsheet.
went up.
But I think I included it in one of your homeworks, but I think it was was it 18%?
I think somewhere in there, it's between 15 and 18, if I recall.
No, I
when
think it
talked
was
to our
high, it wasn't
treasurers.
15, it was,
Yeah.
it was
The
higher
schools
than
claimed
that.
that their budget was 18%.
Yes.
I believe.
Yeah.
If that's
Yes.
correct, what we heard Dan at that
Yeah.
meeting?
Yes, and I think we're the same.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, well, the trust is the same for anybody.
If
Yeah.
they belong to the
Hampshire County
county trust,
Trust.
and many of the schools do.
Yeah.
So we all got the same
18%.
percentage.
Yeah.
I think Amherst Pelham's part of Maya, so all their rates are treated equally within. At least
Correct.
it's at least
Correct,
their
but
group.
that was
Yeah.
a big hit for everyone.
So are
Yeah.
you asking for the percentage or the actual dollar
I
increase?
mean, that's in your line item report.
Yeah. Well, I just wanted, because it was not available at the time when we were discussing
Right.
it, I
Yes.
just wanted the public to be aware of what the percentage increase was in health insurance costs to the town of Northfield.
Health insurance is slated to go up $98,000.
Thank you, Andre, I appreciate
you.
it. I'm pretty sure the public will read.
Yep.
Also, I remember for the past few years, increases have been so minimal.
I remember years when
Yeah.
there was 0.
Right.
I mean, and the last few
Yeah,
have
now
been
it's- yeah.
low single digits. I think once it hit 8%, and that was
Yeah.
like, wow!
Yeah.
And now it's,
Yeah.
and that's a function of medical costs in general.
Yeah.
And I actually sit on the Maya board.
Mm-hmm.
I don't do health insurance because we're not a member. I do
Yeah.
property and casualty and workers' comp, but I sit through the meeting where there's a lot of discussion, so I get to hear all the health insurance. A big factor of that, and I think they also discussed it at the Hampshire, is weight loss drugs.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Those weight loss drugs
Oh, yeah,
are huge,
Exceedingly
Yeah.
expensive, yeah.
and
Yeah.
they're being covered.
Yeah.
So,
The treasurer in another town told me that that was part of it.
yeah, big part of it,
Yeah,
because it's very popular.
yeah.
Any other questions? I'm looking here at the school's request, they're up about $100,000, over $100,000.
Well, the schools break down into the tech and the Pioneer. Pioneer's assessment is not up much at all, based on the formula. Pioneer's assessment to the town is going up $22,575, which is in your budget book, mostly because of the municipal growth factor. Northfield did not have growth, and
Yeah, it was
Bernardston went up massively. I think they're up 185,000.
Oh, yeah.
We're up 22. The big change for Northfield is the tech. When I started, you had 25 students, now you have 50 students.
Yeah.
So there was a big growth this year. It went up 185,000. So the majority of that increase, I took the tuition out for the transportation. You don't have anyone going outside right now. We had kind of reduced it and hung on to it, thinking, well, if someone does decide to go, we do have to transport and pay tuition to Smith Vocational for one program only that is not offered at the tech school. We've not had someone apply for that program in a couple of years, so I actually took that out of the budget. So that's a savings of 40,000, so it helped offset some of that cost. If someone does show up to do that, though, we'll have to revisit it, but keeping our fingers crossed, we do not have, as far as we're aware, any applicant to do that, but they can apply all the way up until, I think, almost May 1st. We would be notified by the school if that happens.
Any other questions?
Just had one quick one. Recreation. I can't remember why did it go up so much?
There's a, I'm gonna pull their budget
Yeah, I
request.
can't remember.
Was it director?
Wages
Oh, was it
because-
director?
Yeah.
or I think-
Director, yeah.
Well, her
Okay.
wages didn't actually go up that much.
No, I think it's the expenses.
Yeah, there was an increase
This
in
is
hours
I
for the
can't
person to
remember
work.
why.
I have my budget sheet
Yeah.
here, and I'll pull it
Because the
out.
director looks like was just,
Didn't go up that much.
So the big growth is an additional $10,000 request for not the director's wages,
but for the staff.
for all the other staff.
Okay.
Because of the increased programming,
Yeah.
we have way more staff covering all of those hours, open gym hours.
Yeah. I'm just curious, they do have a revolving account.
Yes.
Why don't they especially the part-timers are the ones that are there, can't they offset some of that?
A lot of the operating cost is offset by that. So
Yeah.
all the equipment,
Yeah.
materials,
Yeah.
and all that. And I think they do offset some of the wages
Yeah.
through that. And we have a separate one now for summer, so that's
Okay.
not
Right.
here. Summer is kind of operating on its own. So far, so good. But yeah, they offset all the cost of operation, so all the equipment, anything they rent, any program they
Yeah.
run, all of that is going through the revolving, like a fee for service. If your kid wants to sign up for, whatever, and they need a T-shirt and whatever equipment for that child, then that's coming through
The revolving.
revolving fund.
Yeah, because I was kind of, sometimes you have reps, or sometimes you have people just watching for a couple hours, and you gotta
Yeah.
pay them, of course.
But there are a lot more programs
Yeah.
now. She's
Yeah.
done a fabulous job.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, it comes at an expense.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Seeing none, we'll move on to capital. Actually, we can just go down the articles if you want to do that. That would probably be the best way
And just to
do
let
it.
you know, you're seeing the CPA requests. I mean, they don't affect the budget, but I just wanted to know remind you that those were put in.
Okay.
So
Yeah, so,
Yeah.
we did get the CPA funding.
So the first one on would be the Northfield capital projects. And that's, let's grab this here, for $50,000, which is coming out of free cash. Any questions on that?
Just what are the general projects that they're doing this time around?
For the school,
Yeah, for the
So-
elementary school.
They usually
Is that
rotate
the-
with flooring.
they usually-
Yeah,
we
flooring,
always
paving.
do a flooring project.
Okay.
That's 10,000.
Okay.
And then they're putting in cameras for 3.
Okay.
And then an awning for 37. And that
Okay.
comes to the total of 50.
Now, we were at a meeting with the Pioneer, and they were talking, putting in their budget something to do with cameras. That is specifically just for Pioneer? Do you know anything about, or I haven't heard anything about
Yeah,
that.
this is just NES.
This is NES, okay. I
Because
didn't
you
know if
guys
they
have
were.
always split out the NES capital.
Okay.
Pioneer puts it in
Yeah.
there.
Okay. EMS budget, that comes out of most of their enterprise fund.
There is
Ex-
an appropriation.
$102,778, which is our assessment. Any questions on that? Or comments? Ambulance request would be coming out of the EMS Enterprise Fund, $500,000. I understand they have to purchase it this year in order to get it in the next 2 to 3 years. So it is a long-term thing that has to be done a couple of years in advance.
Right, and I believe there's also, let me just follow along as I go through these. So, yeah, the request in for the ambulance is 500,000 with all the related equipment. So it's the total, 500,000 for that. And then the other part of the enterprise fund is, as you see, because it's a 597, 612, that is the rest of the operating that's being offset through the enterprise piece.
Andrea, I just have a quick question since you're talking, just, I know this is the articles, but the ambulance, the money that the Finance Committee approved for the emergency repairs from the reserve fund, have those been accomplished already on that ambulance?
Yes,
Super.
yes, the ambulance is back and back in service.
Thank you.
Again, moving on to sewer enterprise fund culvert. Again, that's $20,000 coming out of their enterprise fund. Capital request for electrical. This is for $150,000 coming from free cash. This is to offset the cost for a $300,000 electrical upgrade that is needed in order to proceed. Without this, all of Main Street and everybody that is on the sewer would be without a sewer, just to let people know.
It is a $300,000 project. They're going to borrow for half of it at this point, is the expectation come fall, and they're asking for half. Now, having said that, we are looking at a one-stop grant for the funding for this project. If we get any grant funds at all, we don't know that we would, under the Rural Development Fund or such. Obviously, that would change the equation. So the problem is the one-stop grants don't go in till May. So we can't know ahead of time. I did send an expression of interest. That's the first thing you can send in to say, hey, is this fundable? What program would you fund it under? It did come back as fundable under the Rural Development Fund. So it is an eligible project. And I submitted it for the full 300 just to see if it was eligible and what funding it would do. So if that's the case, we would obviously move forward with that. And
has anybody approached the college, since they're one of the bigger users, to ask for a donation?
we are in process. I'm working with them. So yes, the assessors and I for a couple of things. So we are in process of setting up a meeting.
Okay.
I have just a quick question on what Dan has been on the sewers. Do they charge the same rate for residential and commercial or large institutions
It's by unit,
by unit?
so that would be broken down differently.
Okay.
So the unit chart, and I'm sure they'd be happy to come before you and show you what that means. There might be someone sitting back there.
There is?
So it depends on all sorts of factors that go into the units. So generally speaking, most commercial probably have different charge based on bathrooms, sinks, use of, versus a home.
Just was asking if there existed, if there was unitary just for everyone, or is it
No.
there's some differences between a residential
Yes.
customer versus a large-scale user?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Karen, is there anything you'd like to say, or no, or have we got it covered?
It was a good summary. There are different levels, if you will, of rates. There's residential, and then there are 5 flat fee, quasi-commercial rates. We have identified areas, as Andrea was getting to, we've identified areas to make it better for FY27, in which there is less residential impact and smoothing out more. We found problems in the math and the budget, and we've been trying to clean it up every year. We have been cleaning up every year, and we have more work to go in front of us for FY27. That's currently ongoing right now.
All right, thank you, Karen.
Yep.
You're welcome.
Revolving fund, there's nothing in that at the moment. Anticipated legal fees. That would be coming out of raising taxation. This is anticipation of a couple of areas that we're looking at having to spend money for additional legal fees that are coming and are actually in the process of, so.
There was a large-scale solar permit denied by the planning board. And there is a 20-day appeal period that expired February 18th, and they filed an appeal. So we will be,
So using the money.
yes.
It's 50 enough. I know what I've seen in Shutesbury, and 50 isn't enough.
That was the lawyer's estimate to put in an account
Yeah.
for now,
Okay.
yes.
So hopefully we won't have to revisit that.
And it made sense to me, since it is an
Town hall-
operating thing, to put it on the tax rate.
Yeah.
I don't see that you would use it as a, usually capital is your free cash use, and so,
Town hall bathrooms, if you've been, ladies, if you've been into the ladies' bathroom, it is, they're having issues. It doesn't conform to handicapped accessibility. We have some leakage there, some either groundwater or some type of water is leaking in that has to be taken care of. I'm sure there is a study that is done on this to.
we had an estimate done, probably a couple of years old now, or over a year old, but I think that the pricing is probably still good enough to do as much of the work as we need to do.
So this says town hall bathrooms, is it just a ladies' room, or are they gonna be working on both
I
of them?
don't think that we really need to do the men's room. It's actually ADA compliant. If you go into the men's room, the stall in there is wide enough. There's a couple things that could be tweaked, but we would wait to see if we can effectively cost it out. But they're not out of compliance. There's just a few things we could do, should the funding prove sufficient. But it's
And-
really to fix the ceiling and the leak in the ladies' room, which is coming down, if you've been in the ladies' room, which most gentlemen have not. The ceiling is actually coming down in the corner, and we have to fix that. And the handicap stall is actually not wide enough for a wheelchair. It's not ADA compliant, so there's a number of problems in the bathroom.
And you won't know till you start knocking down walls on how
True.
bad it is.
Well,
We don't want to talk
Walls in
about
there.
the ceiling at all.
So I see that the request is for $230,000, but the free cash is $228,
I
is
was
there-
balancing the budget.
Okay.
I didn't think the 2,000 would probably make
While
me
we're
the
at,
project couldn't
while
happen.
we're at free cash, just a, free cash is not free cash. Free cash is anything left over from the previous year that hasn't been used in the budget. So that's where that comes from. It's freed up from the preceding or the previous year's budget. So that's what we're looking at last year to be able to compensate and use for some of the things we have in this year's budget. Town hall signs, $10,000. Again, that's coming out of free cash. This is something to give more information to the people in town as they are traveling through town. We're looking at to make it historically correct with the town. Hopefully we have had several quotes on it, and it seems to be within this range. Recreation shed.
I don't have any funding in there. Again, that's at my recommendation. Obviously, if you feel differently, you guys could move the money around. I just was looking at the town's priorities and at the town's budget, and
My opinion as far as doing it, if we can save some money this year and try to keep the costs down, we don't really know what's going to happen next year. We're looking at what the federal government is doing, and that's a trickle-down effect. So I am not unhappy with not funding this, but that's just myself. Other people's opinions, I'm open to that. We are going to eventually, we're going to go through these, and we are going to recommend or not recommend. But I think I want you to think about this, and we'll be coming back next week to go over our recommendations.
The only question I have with the recreation shed, is that something that might be for Lindsay, something that could qualify for CPA money?
No, well,
No?
they did apply.
Okay.
And the reason it didn't pass was because the area of CPA money that would fund that, it has to be for outdoor things only.
Oh, okay.
And technically, they're storing indoor things
Okay.
in the
in an
shed.
outdoor shed.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So that kind of, unfortunately,
Okay,
it's a
yeah.
little
And
technical.
it doesn't mean that we won't revisit it if we're financially a little bit more secure of what's happening,
Right.
the history of what's coming on. So I'm just thinking this year, if we can look at areas where we can be a little bit more frugal, then I think that's what we need to do. So, and again, we will be coming back, and I want you to really think about it, and we're going to make
Stacy's out
recommendations.
fundraising too for it.
Yeah, they
So
always
she's
were.
trying
She was gonna try
trying
and
to
raise
take
some
care of it
funding
better.
for it.
See how we do.
Moving down, highway, plow, truck, and sander. This was on the list from last year to get it to, I mean, this year's chart to replace. This seems to be, this is something that Tommy has looked at, and he thinks he can do it for $200,000. And he's really looking to do this, or to get this, so coming out of free cash, I think that it might work out. Oh, you already took it out. Moving on, the highway grader. I was talking to him today, and he's willing to forego this year. He'll try to repair what he has. It's already been taken out.
Excellent.
Barrier mower barrier. This is to protect the DPW workers from poison ivy, poison oak when they're cutting airborne, what do we call it? Airborne
Particles?
particles.
It seemed like a safety piece of equipment.
It is
not
definitely a
something you
safety
don't wanna-
feature.
Especially if you would be.
And again, looking at what we just had to pay for in insurance, if we have somebody out because of this and we can save their being downtime, that's kind of no-brainer. So that's $15,000 that's coming out of free cash. Emergent service facility.
Now, you'll
Again-
notice that in the past, you have funded this at 500,000, based on what's going on this year, and to make it fit in the budget. Again, you can change the priorities around. I have it in this 300,000 out of free cash. In the past, when you have not had a lot of changes to your operating, you've actually funded it under taxation. But this year, yes, you did, a couple of times. But this year, you have a lot more changes to your operating budget, so it made sense to move it over. And when you moved it over, it would take half of your certified free cash to do it by itself. So it didn't make sense to go with the full 5. Again,
So how much is in that fund at the moment? Do you have any idea?
$50,000.
So this would just up it to.
Because you moved the rest of it
350,
into the other purchase. So
Right.
yes, this would start you back on the track
Okay.
for,
Okay.
we left 50 because there was talk about hiring some potential designers to look at some floor plans. So they really they wanted to keep some money in there, but to keep moving forward, you'll eventually have to start looking at professionals again for other plans or consulting, so.
Okay, next is OPED. And I kind of understand that, but people who will be watching us do not understand what that is. It's $100,000 coming out of free cash. It's something that we are building up because we are looking at necessity, but the necessity is what?
It's other post-employment benefits. That's what OPEB stands for. It is retiree health care.
Okay.
In Massachusetts, towns are supposed to be, many are, moving towards a fully funded OPEB account. What I mean by that is, each year we have an actuarial study. Every 2 years we have an OPEB report, and it tells you to be fully funded. In other words, to be able to start moving the money through the OPEB account so that you're paying through it and appropriating through it, you have to hit a certain amount of money. The town of Northfield is close to 70% funded, which is very good. You can cut this down, but it just cuts your assessment rate. The idea is that at some point this would become fully funded, and this number would drop significantly because you would be using funds in your account and replenishing them at a much lower rate than $100,000 a year. So we've tried very hard to keep this on track, to keep that funding mechanism in place, to get the town 100% funded, whereupon you can drop this way down to a much lower number to keep that account.
Does that 100% target keep growing, or do we know what 100% would mean once we get to that point?
Well, this is the moving target, but our idea is hasn't fluctuated so much that we can't see where 100% is. And then we're hoping it will kick off enough for most years to be able to pay employee retirement benefits. This is, by law, it is funded, and then it is put into specific account, which in our case, we're invested with the state through the treasurer. Treasurer is the OPEB trust fund manager. And so we're invested in the state pool, which gives us a much larger rate of return because we're invested with other people's OPEB funds. The idea being that at some point, it would come out of your operating, because you'll see we have retiree health insurance and insurance costs, and that at some point, that's technically an unfunded liability.
Yeah.
So the idea is to fund that liability in perpetuity.
So in the account, is it an interest-bearing account? So
Yes, that's what you're hoping for.
So once it gets to that point, that if we hit a draw from it, the interest would be what would be paying that?
For the most
So we
part,
would-
that's the hope, is that
Make it
you would.
self-supporting,
It would
yes.
make it self-supporting, and we would
Perfect.
drop, and it would only be odd years that we would have to add, maybe supplement some, to keep that as a fund that would pay for itself to some extent. So that, every 2 years, we do update that report to make
Okay,
sure that
so
we're
it's
on
like
track.
we
Yes, we do,
should,
every 2 years, we have
Okay.
our OPEB audit.
Actuarial
Yes,
study, yeah.
yeah, we do it every 2 years. It's not hugely expensive, it's
No.
a couple $1,000s.
Once you do
'cause-
that first one, it.
Correct, now then it's just an update every
Yeah.
2 years.
Now, this doesn't have any money in it, but there is actually some money in it. The HERO Act acceptance, I understand that the
There's no-
assessor has in their budget a amount to pay this fund. And
Yeah, they factored in, and when she presented, I think she told you she factored in the cost of it and how it would hit the enterprise fund. So that's part of the request for, if you look on your very first page, your budget summary page, you will see that the overlay
Yeah.
has $250,000 request in it, over 100 last year. So you have to remember that 150,000 of this year's requested expenditures is going into overlay.
Okay. That was to be a catch-up, if I recall correctly.
Correct. Well, as you get to the bottom, you'll see that we're pretty much going to drain it with the
Yeah.
lawsuit
Okay.
settlement and interest. So that amount she incorporated, because people apply for it and they get paid for it out of overlay. She gets, it's abatements and rebates, abatements.
Okay.
So we have to, we're funding it that way. It doesn't show, it shows up on the tax rate. It just doesn't show up on this sheet
Right.
as an expenditure. It shows up through the overlay number that you see on your very first budget summary, which goes directly on the tax rate as an expenditure. That pays for people's abatements and all
Exemptions.
senior exemptions. This is a new, if the town votes to accept this exemption, it's a new exemption, will also come out of those funds, those type of funds.
if you look at the next two there, I would say that this would come out, senior assess.
Yes?
Yeah, and the tax bill for single payment.
Oh, the
Those-
tax bill for single payment just allows you to merge tax bills for bills that are below a certain amount of money. There's no net cost here except saving a little bit of postage and treasurer's time
Yeah.
for sending out,
No orders.
yeah, for bills that are under, I think we have, I'll have to write the article, but $50 or less. We're not gonna bill twice a year for that. We'd just like to bill once. So it just saves, that's all that is. So it's really not any
Yep.
funds to the town, one way or the other, except postage maybe.
Moving down to town clerk, treasurer, collector stipend. This is certification. Once either one of these positions gets certified, the state allows you to be compensated, or the town to pay a stipend, and the stipend is $1,000.
I'm recommending you fund it at 500 each.
Okay, oh, whatever.
Okay.
And it has to be.
You could change it in the future, but
Yeah.
it would be a start.
In
Okay.
order to, I can
Yeah.
tell you a little bit about the town clerk position. Town clerk, you have to be a town clerk for 3 years, and then you take a test to get certified. You have to know pretty much every state law that ever was ever passed, anything that has to do with vital records, anything that has to do with elections. So it's a pretty intense class. I could have taken had enough credits to do it, but I was retiring at the time, so I didn't think it would be a thing
And
to do.
the treasurer
so.
collector is the same. There's a school that they go to every year, and they take classes, and they have to pass those.
You have to keep it up. They
You have to keep it up. So, right,
Yeah.
this is an incentive, because we really want certified treasurer collectors and town clerks. It's their incentive to make sure that they keep going to those schools, that they keep their certification up, that they're learning the new laws, that they're going to those. I mean, we are lucky, we have very diligent employees. They're going to do it anyway. So it's a little bit of a reward for them to take the better part of a week every year and go away and continue to sharpen those skills and take those classes.
Actually, 3 times a year, you go out for 3 to 4 days.
Right,
As far
so
as
they're-
full days. that you're
Right,
out.
and although we pay for their traveling expenses, we're taking them out of their house and schlepping them off to wherever for lucky that once in a
UMass.
while they're UMass, but sometimes there's a Cape one.
They don't have to go to that one.
They don't have to. But we're trying to, and I don't think she's gone.
Who's that?
I don't think our treasurer
Yeah, she
collector's
is.
gone.
Yeah, she's gone.
But anyway, so we're trying to, make sure that they keep those skills up. So it's a, it's a
Because
premium
UMass is where you
payment.
get the credits and the.
Correct.
Yeah, and
Correct.
again, it keeps you on top of things so that, when you're dealing with the state and dealing with different things, they change almost weekly so it's good to keep on top of things.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Moving on, really doesn't affect us that much, but just want to make people aware. CPA annual funds, Historic Society heating, and CPA Hobo Falls conservation area. I know that we have someone here, if you want to
Cemetery.
speak to any of them. So the public understands what they might be voting for.
Okay. For the Historical Society, it's in that, I don't know if you guys are aware of where that's located. It's in one of the older schools on Pine Street, and it currently it has no air conditioning, and the heating is really expensive because it's oil heat. So we put out an ask for, have 2 heat pumps, 2, I'm losing the word. Those little
Mini splits.
Thank you.
splits.
Those, sounds like. Mini splits put into the 2 main rooms on the main floor, and that will help preserve the historic things that are in there, because it'll be more climate control. So that's what that one is about. With looking toward being able to open more often, having more people through more programs if it's more comfortable there. Hobo Falls, I believe, is a survey. They're going to survey that area and have an official, it's been donated land, and they're just paying here for the survey of that land.
Legal costs and potential survey easement costs.
Yeah.
For the acquisition.
Yeah. And the cemetery repairs, it's for cleaning and repairs, Center Cemetery. Sandy Campbell and I are working on cleaning the stones and resetting the ones that are leaning. There's several that are broken. We're going to repair those and putting up, and we're going to eventually get some volunteers to help and so on. But that's all that is for supplies only. It's not, all the labor's volunteer. And then we also have, oh gosh, my brain's not working. He's working on the veterans piece of it, and make sure they're all.
Bob Henry.
Thank you. Wow.
Yeah, Bob Henry's
How did I
working
do
on
that, you guys?
veterans in the cemetery. Right now, they're working on the Center Cemetery, which is our oldest cemetery. I would say almost 1/3 has been pretty well cleaned. And what they're using is the same materials that they used at Arlington National Cemetery. They're making sure that they aren't damaging any of the stones, and it's a lot of elbow grease that they're using on them to clean it. They're also resetting some of the stones, bringing them back up to straight. Also finding some different historical markers and trying to do a little bit of the history of some of the people that are actually buried there. And eventually, I think you're going to have a something that people would want to go and look at and check out, and it'll be a attribute to the town. Any other questions on any of these? So Andrea, you basically.
Well, the last one that you want to take care of is, and I put it on here so you wouldn't lose it, since it's raised by taxation, is the interest for the ATB case settlement for $89,000. So it is on the bottom of the sheet there. So if you look at that and the $250,000 for overlay, that's a third of the increase you're asking for this year.
So the 89 would come out of the overlay?
No,
Oh,
It's
it's on,
addition
it's straight
to.
on taxation.
Too, yeah.
So it's gonna be 200,
Yeah.
essentially $349,000 will be overlay. The overlay's paying the abatement.
Oh, okay,
So the current overlay's
Yeah.
paying the abatement, and that's why we have to refill it.
yeah.
The interest is a whole separate beast because it's been 2 years. These cases take years, and you have to pay interest
Yeah.
back to the date
Yeah.
that you essentially were holding their money.
You guys
So-
negotiating the interest at all, or
Yes,
can
it
you?
was.
I don't think you can negotiate the interest under law.
Yeah.
So this has to do with what piece of property or what tax?
It has to do with your largest taxpayer.
And is that a secret or
No, it's the First Light
first light
abatement
abatement?
that they filed.
And
So
we thought it was worth more and they thought it was worth less, so
and
there
we
was-
met in the middle.
Okay,
So we aren't getting them everything they thought they wanted, and they're not giving up everything we thought we wanted. That's why you go to the appellate tax board, and they decide, and then what you have to give back, you have to give interest on, because you've been sitting on, because they have to pay up front. So theoretically, we've been sitting on the money, because in order for them to file the abatement, they have to pay in full. So we've been holding that money, and now we have to return it with interest. Unfortunately, the interest percentage by law is higher than the interest we ever make
Yeah, I
on
was
it.
gonna say,
It's crazy.
You guys don't make 14%.
No, we do not, but that's the law. So we pay back more than we've ever made interest on theoretically, technically. But I just want to point out, people think that all of a sudden you're spending $1 million over last year. Just remember that 30% of that just has to do with money that we did take in at some point. We just now have to give back because the court says that we can't keep it all. And that has to go on the tax rate for the overlay and the interest. And that's gonna be $350,000 of the $1 million request and change. So people look at this and go, $1 million, and then just remember 30% of it is those two things alone. It's just the nature of the beast. Do you have any question on the short-term rental? We're gonna go for try number 3. We haven't brought it in a couple of years, but we will be asking the town to consider adopting a short-term rental occupancy tax. This applies to all rentals in town, and just remember that technically it also applies to Airbnbs and all of those. And you have a potential campground
Yeah.
that would open up, that would apply as well to that campground. So we see expenditures going up. We're trying to balance that with at least some form of revenue. It may not have made much sense in the past when we didn't see a lot of short-term rentals, but the number is up higher than I think people think, and so it makes sense. The town is passing on the opportunity to potentially go after some of that revenue, and we need to build revenue so that all of this isn't falling just onto the homeowner taxpayer.
do we have a handle on how many Airbnbs we actually have in the town?
I do not. We've looked at it in the past, but I'll ask her to. We can.
There's
You just
someone-
Google it. I mean,
Yeah.
literally, you can Northfield Airbnb, but and we've done it periodically from time to time, and the number does change.
'Cause I think the state has to track, because they have to collect their
Yes.
state tax. The state may be able to help you out with that.
Yeah. So we'll get an updated
Yeah.
estimate on that. But we periodically have peered into that to see what we're talking about. And the campground is being built. The last we heard, they had their water test and they theoretically passed the water flow. So I'm assuming we're going to see some movement on that this spring.
Just a quick question. Obviously, you're asking to reintroduce this rental or short-term rental tax. Do we have a meals tax currently in this town?
Yes, we do.
Town passed that years ago.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure.
Yes, we have a meals
Okay.
and beverage tax.
All right.
town property tax title, what's that?
Again, trying to increase revenue to help offset some of this. There was some talk, as you recall, a couple of years ago, about a number of parcels that the town has taken, some of them 20 or plus years ago. And we'd really like to put them back on the tax rate, and the only way for that to happen is for the town meeting to vote them over to the select board. And then from there, I think the select board will review each one. There may be some that it would make more sense to preserve or conserve, but they can't do anything with them. They just sit technically under the care and custody of the collector who has taken them. And the town can't transfer them, can't conserve them, can't put them in a conservation, can't turn them into recreational land, can't sell them. If we had a number of parcels here, it would be great to have an auction. If it turns out there's enough parcels that the select board wants to do that, you put them back on the tax roll. I mean, this is only half. The town's sitting on another dozen or so properties that we're clearing the title to. These, the lawyer established, are clear, and we could move forward on these. But the town doesn't pay taxes to itself. So anything here that the town would want to consider transferring to private ownership again, you're
Put it back on
receiving,
the tax rolls.
you're receiving
Yeah,
zero right
A lot of times, you
now.
know, you have these abutters would love to increase their
Sure.
yard for, you know, for a few
Sure.
$1,000s. Yeah.
So, you know, some of these are little things, some of them are a little larger, some of them. So the idea is to try and, again, let's get the revenue up, let's try to bring revenue back. And one of them is to get things back on the tax roll that the town is not using or does not need to be sitting on. Now, again, select board will review each one. It might make sense for some of these not to go back to the public for various individual reasons, but I'm sure there's at least a number here that it makes sense. And you can't have an auction unless you have a few properties, because no auction house is really interested in running one. And there's only 3 ways to transfer a town property. One is the state. The state comes in, like they are waiting for the state to make an offer on the one that went through the last town meeting. 2 is an auction, which is fair and open, and the auction house advertises it. 3 is to actually put out a request for proposals on each individual property. And then that's a process for procurement that we have to go through. We have to publish it, we incur that cost. We have to take sealed bids and go through the whole process. Auction is obviously the most efficient, but you need at least a handful of properties for an auction house to be interested. So we're bringing them back. I'm hoping people have had a chance to think about them. We'll put the maps out there and people can look at them, but, and again, not every one of these may go for sale. The town may decide that there may be 1 or 2 that make sense to keep for a reason. But that's what those properties are, and the town's been sitting on some of them for decades.
Just a quick question, because of the Supreme Court ruling on this municipality seizing properties for tax title.
Yep.
Are any of these properties so far, has anybody brought any type of action against the town, against any of
Some of
these
these are quite
outstanding
old.
properties?
We do have to treat it a little differently because tried to kind of do this under the old law, but the new law has kicked in.
Yeah.
So we will have to treat it a little bit differently. But our lawyers are pretty secure that these properties in particular, we really don't stand much risk.
Okay,
There-
thank you. That's all, I just wanted to know if that was a question.
Any other questions? We're gonna ask everybody to look over these articles. Next week, when we come back, I want to go through each one of them, and we're gonna give our recommendations on each one of these. So take your time, look them over, look over the omnibus, make sure we're on top of that. Administrator's report, I think we've gone through just about
I
anything.
think you've gone through it. The only thing, wait, I think I did have one thing that I made a note of. The elevator, I'll let you all know about that. At this point in time, it's a bit of an expense, but it goes in the town hall section. If you look at the omnibus, the town hall has one line for all the individuals. My thought is to process it through there and see if we wash out by the end of the year. And if we don't, maybe we transfer from another account. Not to bring that one to you at this time, and we'll see how it goes. However, the reason we're meeting down here, one of the reasons that we're meeting down here besides the elevator is there's no heat in the select board meeting room. The mini split doesn't work. So Monday, March 3rd, because we have two heads for the mini splits. One services one side of the building, one services the other. If you'll recall, we already went through this. The systems are essentially the same age. We had a ton of leaks, and we had to replace several mini splits. We now have an issue with the other side of the building. We don't know how bad it is. They're coming again on Monday to do more assessment and work on it. So I don't know the extent of that project. That may be a project, if it's just some repairs, we'll try to absorb it in the budget. If it ends up being a larger project, I may have to bring that back to you. I don't know the answer to that yet, but I just wanted to put it on your radar.
Yeah, that's the only heat and cooling that they have up there. Have we ever thought about supplementing a different type of heat?
Oh, you'd have to run,
Lines or, no,
yeah, you'd
electric,
have to
you could
run
do-
heat all the way up in through
Yeah.
there. That room was added, and because it was added the way it was, they didn't bother to run all that, because the mini split should cover that room. And it does, in normal circumstances. It covers that room just fine. But it does not have a it does not have a second heating source, like most of the rest of the rooms in the building, which are connected to the furnace. And we have 3 redundant heating systems. We have the pellet furnace, which then pumps through the system into the heat. And we have an oil backup, which then pumps into the system if the pellets, for whatever reason, the pellet stove isn't working or the pellets run out, whatever. And then the third backup is the mini split. The mini split is primarily used for air conditioning in the summer, because we don't have other air conditioning. But it is also a bump up for heating if for some reason the other systems don't need it. I mean, I know in my office, I don't turn the mini split on for heat. I just use the regular furnace. But in the summer, it's pretty much all of these rooms are almost unbearable without some form of air. And so it definitely does that.
Okay. Reviewing and approving minutes. I'm going to have a list of all of our agendas that we've had. And I'm going to mix and add them to all of the minutes that you have sent. And then next week, we're going to approve all of the minutes that I think that we're missing. I don't
Okay.
think we're missing that many. But I'll have a
Hopefully we're not
list.
missing any. I'm pretty sure we're caught up. But
I am 100% sure that I'm 99% because this one isn't done yet.
well,
Minutes are any meetings attended? None. Public comments? Any public comments? Yes, sir.
I just had
I
one,
think we need you to come up here because
Yeah.
the microphone, let me just move out of your way.
Mitch Damon, 5 Main Street. So I just had one question about the historic building, the society building there. And I was curious if they've got any insulation in that building at all, because I know if you put those mini splits in there, it's going to be a hard time keeping them hot on a hot day, especially if you walk in the afternoon. It's one thing if you start them first thing in the morning. But that's something that might be considered along with that, or start with that and then do the mini splits after. But
No, well, I've only been on that board for a little over a year, but what I remember that they said that they had, because it's a historically dedicated building.
Right.
So we're really limited on how and what we can do to it as far as, changing anything at all. So I know they were working on it at one time to get it insulated. But that's a good thing to follow up on. Thank you.
because that could suck up a lot of power too.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
I'll follow up.
Any correspondence? I think I sent out to you the agreement, and I'd like to have a discussion next week on what your feelings are on the agreement for the district.
Okay.
I'm not sure if there's a meeting coming up, but I know I sent those out to you, and they're going to be, I think, trying to put that on our this town meeting.
I don't know if that's gonna happen, but I did want to give you an update. After the meetings between the towns, Finance Committee and Select Board, Karen Kelly, who's in Bernardston, was tasked with putting together like a cover saying, here's the documents we have, and there's 5 of them, including their submission and then the cross comparison and various other things, letters from some of the towns. She wrote a cover letter with that, sent that to me last week, because I guess the boards agreed that we were going to use our attorneys, Northfield's attorneys, and split the
Okay.
cost.
Okay.
And so I wrote an introductory paragraph and concluding paragraph today, and all of that was sent to the town's attorney for review for the towns today. I don't know if any of, or all of that will come back in time and then be, again, worked with the school. I assume there'll be some additional negotiation, whether or not that'll make it before May to actually get on the warrant. I mean, they'll be signing a warrant. I mean, next week is March. They're signing a warrant in April.
Yeah, I don't
So
believe it's gonna happen this year, as far as.
well, certainly, I don't know about annual. But at any rate, I just wanted to let you know that it is out. It has gone to the attorney for the review for the towns as of today.
Perfect. If we have the information, we'll discuss it. But again, look it over. Is any of that information that you could send to us, or is it just what you sent to the attorney?
I can send you the whole packet if you wanted.
Is that would be reasonable? Yeah.
Sure, okay.
Yes, thank you.
Did you mention at all about the capital items that seem to be of concern with everybody?
There's a whole breakdown of
Okay.
the, that they put together,
Okay.
the questions. I'll send it to you.
And I think our biggest concern was the separation of capital articles
Yeah.
with
From
the
operating
omnibus.
budget,
Yeah.
And I think I personally will hold my ground on that.
Yeah. Yep.
So no other correspondence have gone out. Nothing in a net anticipated 24 hours. I will be looking for, our next meeting will be next Monday. And that is, I don't have my calendar here,
The 3rd.
March 3rd.
6 p.m.
Same time, maybe the same place, who knows? If the elevator is back in order, we'll be back upstairs but wear your sweaters, I guess.
That's not that
I will have
bad.
to zoom in for that meeting.
That'll be fine.
'Cause
Yeah, so, and again, we're just gonna finalize the budget, finalize what we're looking at capital, finalize anything else that has come up. We've taken care of the request tonight. I seem to think it's time to adjourn. I will entertain a motion to adjourn
I, Bernie Parada, make a motion to adjourn the meeting of the Finance Committee.
at 7:09, right? That's correct? And we started at 6:01.
6:01.
Yeah. Thank you all for coming, appreciate it, enjoy the
I second the
warmer weather.
motion.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I appreciate it. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying yes or no. Dan Campbell says yes.
Gail Weiss, yes.
Bernie Parada, yes.
Lindsay McCarthy, yes?
Robin Vandermaat, yes.
Thank you for putting in my place. I appreciate it.
Take
Good
care.
night.